Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kovar.
Here.
Councilmember Mail. Councilmember Qureshi.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Great, terrific. So tonight, we don't have any changes to our agenda this evening. Looking forward to the next couple of weeks on next week on actually before next week on Friday we have another community coffee starting at 8 a.m. This time we will be in Tacoma Junction at the bakery there, and Friday morning is also bike to work day. I guess all days is bike to work day, but I will be at the gazebo at 7:30. So meet at the gazebo, and then we can go to the bakery and have some treats.
Are we biking to the bakery?
Yes, it's bike to work.
Okay.
And then I'm biking here.
And bike to eat.
Yes. And then later in the day, we have the groundbreaking at Washington Adventist University. So Friday is going to be a busy day. Then next week, on May 25th, we will not be having a council meeting that evening. And so our next council meeting will be Wednesday, June 1st. And on that evening, the City Council will be hitting the road. We're taking a field trip to the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center, and we'll be holding our meeting there. The meeting on June 1st will begin at 7 p.m. with a small reception to kick off Immigrant Heritage Month, and then we'll have our meeting at the Rec Center. So I hope everyone will join us on June 1st at 7 p.m. During that council session on June 1st, we will have two proclamations. One will be on Immigrant Heritage Month, and then June 2nd is Gun Violence Prevention Day. So please wear orange to the council meeting on June 1st and on June 2nd, and we will have a proclamation that evening. Our voting session that night will be on the second reading ordinance eliminating the Area B permit parking program. We will also have a discussion of legislative priorities, including state legislation to be proposed by the Maryland Municipal League. We'll have a discussion to follow up on our community conversation on affordable housing and a discussion of the proposed revisions to the Community Grants Program. Then our next meeting will be Wednesday, June 8th. It will be back here starting at 7:30. Our voting items will be the second reading ordinance regarding the banning of the commercial use of plastic single-use carryout bags. We will have the first reading ordinance extending the owner-occupied group housing registration program and a resolution providing for appointments to the Recreation Committee. Our two work sessions that evening will be a discussion of police department plans and general orders for use of portable cameras in the community and a discussion of the draft streetscape manual. That will take us then to our meeting on Wednesday, June 15th. Again, the meeting will be here starting at 7:30. And we have tentatively scheduled two work sessions. One is a presentation by the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Services Chief of Operations. We have a presentation of the parking study report and tentatively a discussion of library design options. And then the Saturday, June 18th, we will have our community conversation focused on youth success. So we hope everyone will be here in the community center that afternoon starting at 12:30, I think. It says 11:30. Yes. It's 12:30, okay. Community conversation on youth success, and be on the lookout for more information on that. And that'll take us into June. So those are our upcoming items. And now I'd just like to take a moment, since we have with us the Tacoma Park Horticulture Club, and to recognize your centennial. And I think we have some other guests. Did you guys bring something too? Or well.
Woo-hoo.
All right. Well, would you like to all do this together then?
What is all this about? Just
All right.
centennial? The whole thing?
Why don't everybody come up on
Nobody
the
here
stage?
looks that old.
You can use the steps better. We want you to keep doing horticulture stuff.
All right, we're going to get a little closer? Yeah. All right. You take a picture first, or? Girls on this side, I know, right? It's like really.
Don't stand in back.
All right.
Jeffrey stands in back because he's tall.
All right. Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Yep. That's right. I know it didn't happen. It did not happen.
Wait.
I got it.
All right, terrific. Well, I would like to first hand it over to our delegate.
Sure. We have a proclamation from our delegation, Sheila Hickson, Delegate David Moon, myself, and Senator Raskin, but we also have one from the Maryland Department of Agriculture, the Secretary's citation. So I'll just read it very quickly and present it to you. To the Tacoma Park Horticultural Club, the 18th day of May, 2016, in recognition of the 100th anniversary of the 1916 founding of the Tacoma Park Horticultural Club. Congratulations on being one of the oldest and continuously operating garden clubs in the United States of America. The Maryland Department of Agriculture commends you on your century of service to Tacoma Park and nearby communities. Congratulations. From the Secretary.
All right, and I bring apologies from Senator Raskin and Delegate Hickson. They couldn't make it tonight, but I do have a citation from our team. And this one reads, the Maryland General Assembly official citation, be it hereby known to all that sincerest congratulations are offered to Tacoma Horticultural Club in recognition of the 100th anniversary of the 1916 founding of the Tacoma Horticultural Club, one of the oldest active and continuously operating garden clubs in the United States, presented on this 18th day of May. So congratulations.
And I won't read this whole thing, but I will just I will just say that in particular, the residents and the city council and the city staff very much appreciate all the hard work of the Horticultural Club. You do many things and contribute to the community, its longevity, including a window display at the historic Tacoma, additional gifts to the Tacoma Park and the Tacoma Park DC libraries, a gala marking the centennial, and monthly articles for publication in the club newsletter and on its website. So congratulations, and we look forward to another 100 years. So, thank you. Yes, all right. Thank you.
Speak for the charter member.
See you guys. Good to see you. Yeah.
All right. We will move on now to public comments on our voting items. Our first voting item this evening is a second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2017 tax rates. Do I have anyone who has comments on that? Sorry, please.
Yeah, where did it come from?
Good evening, Larry Silverman, Birch Avenue, S&A Beads. Every time I come here to speak about the business personal property tax, I learn something new. I'm getting my education in 3-minute increments. I particularly want to thank Jason Damweber for his explanations of council action and Councilmember Schultz for relaying information about the sector plan in the New Hampshire Avenue area. Thank you. I just want to make a few points that may not have been discussed adequately before. Number one, inventory versus equipment. Some have suggested relief at a future time might exempt inventory but continue the tax on equipment. This is not a meaningful distinction. Many businesses that support Tacoma families have large investments in equipment, gyms, IT companies, equipment rental, art and print shops, to name just some obvious ones. Two, impact of the tax. How big a bite is the personal property tax on business? Assume a business person earns a profit of $50,000 with equipment and inventory of $165,000. It's a very reasonable assumption in this area. The state income tax is about $24.65, and the property tax is $25.58. In other words, it's like paying double tax. If the legislature were to double the tax rate on businesses, there would be a revolt throughout the state, but this city accomplishes the same thing routinely. 3, paperwork. The personal property tax requires a special form, which is mostly unrelated to other tax forms with its own depreciation rate, for example. To my knowledge, TurboTax and other such services do not deal with it. This is a substantial burden, especially on small taxpayers. Next, compliance. Fortunately for the business climate, many people who are subject to this tax are unaware of it and do not pay it. Perhaps a new environmental enforcement officer might earn his keep chasing after micro enterprises. Economic development. As Councilmember Kovar can attest, I've done a lot of work in the past with cities seeking to enhance economic development. A common lesson from the experience is that the biggest bang for the buck comes from helping existing enterprises and not necessarily luring new ones. Economic development, too. The council needs to come up with a rationale for any economic development program. The best approach is not to focus on enriching city government, but to focus instead on aiding the families in the city to care for themselves. If you support the people will support the city. Finally, art districts. Because so many of my customers are artists with micro enterprises, I urge the council to think seriously about how you can help them thrive here. An arts district based in part on tax incentives should be an element of any economic development plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comments on our second reading of our FY 2017 tax rate? Okay. Our next voting item this evening is the second reading ordinance adopting our 2017 stormwater management budget. Third item on our voting agenda tonight is a second reading ordinance adopting the 2017 budget. Okay. Our next is a second reading ordinance establishing a housing reserve fund. Next is a second reading ordinance approving the franchise agreement with Comcast. Next is 2 resolutions giving direction on the cable memorandums of understanding with Montgomery County. One is an MOU concerning the Verizon cable franchise. The other is concerning the Comcast cable franchise. Any public comments on that? Next, we have a first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code to restrict the commercial use of plastic single-use carryout bags. Any public comments on that?
All right, week 3. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Tanya DeCona, Buffalo Avenue, Ward 1. I had a chance to speak with Peter Kovar in the interval, and I actually did considerable research into compostable products. And you will see, if you'd like to get copies, we can see about that, that sadly, compostable products are a big problem. So, compostable, you think that means they're going to biodegrade, and you think that means you can put them in your compost pile, but you would be wrong. Most of the time, you're having to send it to a special industrial facility that handles that kind of plastic. So the really bad news is that, unfortunately, it contaminates regular plastic recycling. So I have a little cup over there, which is very ordinary, like Panera cup or something, that I use repeatedly. And the point I want to kind of make in one of these articles, it talks about greenware. You know, it's like a cup that has the green logo, and it looks very exciting because it's going to be... Well, greenware is one of those ones that's a number, if you look on the bottom, it's a number 7, non-recyclable plastic. So, according to Alan Dershowitz, let me get his name right, Hershkowitz, a senior scientist for the Natural Resources Defense Council, there was a very nice piece on public radio on the Here and Now show, like a 14-minute segment where he goes into more detail. This is the article's synopsis, but it's nice. He lays out all the details and why compostables have big problems. And one of the biggest is that most compostable stuff ends up in the landfill, which ends up being a methane gas emitter. So I know this is complex, I know it's a lot of ground to cover, but the point I want to make is I'm sorry to announce that I don't think compostable plastic bags are a good choice at all. So we're back to like reusables for sure, whether they have a Tacoma Park Farmers Market logo or not, or if they're donated from industry or whatever it may be. Ordinary plastic bags can be recycled. Ordinary in the handled outer type can be recycled in a way and does not contaminate the pool. So this is the point that I want to make. I'm sorry to announce that it's a good idea, but it's greenwashing. It's false. It's you'd see how complex and particularized it is, and you can. So that was the main thing that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention. So, of course, the best thing we can do is to just try not to use as many plastic bags. Don't acquire them if you don't need them. And the last point I want to mention is that Alan Hershkowitz, this senior scientist, mentions something very interesting. And he says, your perfect world is that you want everything you end up using to end up in the recycling bin. Unfortunately, earthware, as I say, is a 7 non-recyclable that you can't. So you're actually better off using that and having it go into the recycling, when you're done with it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry. Any other public comments on this ordinance? No? Then we will move on to any public comments regarding the first reading ordinance terminating the Area B permit parking program. No? And then we have a consent agenda we're voting on tonight on appointments to the Nuclear Free Tacoma Park Committee and the appointment to the Committee on the Environment. All right, now we will turn to public comments on any other items. Any public comments this evening? Okay.
Hi, Mary Jane Maturi, Ward 2. Parents of special needs adults, an assistant teacher spirit club class that met at 6:30, meets every here in the Lilac Room every Wednesday at 6:30. I'm asking the council to do something. You listen, and Captain Collington was very kind, and he invited us to sergeant's quarterly meetings, but so far you have done nothing. The council has done nothing to help us. And you listen, but you don't do anything. It's very frustrating. With all people, our children, grandchildren are more in need of anybody. When your brain doesn't function properly, you are the most vulnerable people. My son has been bullied all his life. He's my only child, and it breaks my heart. And now, and the thing of it is, they get some help when they're in school, but once they're out of school, it's dropped. Most of them get nothing. And when they're young, they think, oh, well, they're cute and all this. But when you're 30 years old, like my son, they don't think you're cute anymore. And he gets no help at all. The Developmental Disabilities Administration, run by the Maryland State, has a long waiting list. My son has been on the waiting list for 11 years. It's like we don't get much help. Plus that everything is in Rockville. There's the Montgomery County Police is having a autism night out this Friday night, but it's all the way out in Rockville. Most of us can't drive out to Rockville at night. I can't drive out to Rockville at night. Almost all the programs they have, the Arc of Montgomery County is in Rockville, and it's not even near a subway stop. You all don't realize how difficult. Montgomery County won't give a class in Tacoma Park because they say, because jurisdictional issues, because we all have a rec department, so you should take care of us, but you all don't take care of us. It's like, catch-22. What do we have to do? What do I have to do to get help? Please do something, okay? Thank you.
Any other public comments this evening? Mm-hmm.
Good evening. I'm Colleen Cordes, 500 New York Avenue, and my colleague and I are here tonight representing the Tree Commission to discuss the WSSC's new plan for replacing sewers along Little Eastern Avenue. The project involves removing more than 20 mature canopy trees from a 20-foot wide swath of the backyards of the 6600 and 6700 blocks of Eastern. It also appears to endanger a significant number of other trees near that construction zone that grow in the backyards of both the Eastern homeowners and Westmoreland homeowners whose properties border that 20-foot construction zone. The project's now taken several years, apparently because of a lack of consensus about where to place the new sewers in this very old neighborhood. The sewer lines were laid such a long time ago that there are no records of easements that WSSC can turn to. So it's now in the process of trying to purchase 20-foot easements from 22 homeowners on Eastern, where clear cutting will be required to lay the backyard sewer lines. Eastern residents have had a chance to give their input to WSSC's decision about where to place the new sewer line. But the voting process and the way WSSC has reported it has not been transparent. Residents from Eastern and Westmoreland have come to the Tree Commission with grave concerns about the impact of the WSSC's current plan. They're concerned about their own trees, the environmental degradation of their whole neighborhood, and erosion and stormwater management problems they fear will occur if WSSC follows through on its current plan to remove all trees in that 20-foot easements that they need to construct the new sewer lines in the backyard. Westmoreland homes are downhill from the planned clear-cut zone behind the Eastern houses. So they're especially concerned about stormwater management. No replanting of trees will be allowed in that 20-foot easement. An earlier option that WSSC had originally favored, and that is still clearly the most environmentally friendly, was to install grinder pumps at each home, which homeowners would not be responsible for maintaining or replacing for 12 years. WSSC recently decided against that option after a confusing voting process covering the longest stretch of the project, 14 of the 22 homes. Some residents clearly opposed the grinder pumps, as 6 of the 14 voted for the backyard option, not the grinder pumps. But it's not clear to us from the vote how many actually preferred the backyard option. And I'm going to ask, our third colleague was not able to come to share the time with us. Could I finish this?
The process that we go by is to request that prior to a meeting. So I think and I know the Tree Commission has actually requested a meeting, that if you would like to submit your comments and you'd like to go and
okay, well
speak,
then we
fine.
have some recommendations, and it isn't at all clear to us that that there's a majority who actually are preferring the backyard option, and I'll let Gresham continue.
Thank you.
Need the copy. Hi, I'm Gresham Lowe. I'm at 7014 Sycamore, as you know. So I'm also a member of the Tree Commission, and we have some recommendations. Our first recommendation is the city arborist, as soon as possible, try to coordinate with WSSC doing his own tree impact assessment for the affected homes on both Eastern and Westmoreland. We judge this to be necessary because the recent tree survey done by WSSC's arborist may significantly underestimate damage to trees on the properties. It also appears to be based on different ways of analyzing harm to trees than our community has encoded in our tree ordinance. WSSC, of course, is not legally required to abide by our ordinance, but we believe the homeowners have a right to an environmental impact assessment that reflects best practices in analyzing tree vulnerability and our own community standards. And we all need such an assessment before and not after it's too late for residents in WSSC to take such concerns into account, such as cutting the trees. Mm-hmm. So we may be near that point once WSSC begins mailing checks to individual homeowners for easement agreements. Also, we note that the WSSC arborist's recent tree report indicates an openness to such an assessment because it states, tree removal will be subject to the City of Tacoma Park tree ordinance and associated fees. I won't be able to get through all this, but we have a copy for you.
Thank you.
We request that the city engineer try to coordinate with WSSC his own assessment of stormwater management flooding and erosion issues posed by both the backyard construction option and the grinder pump option. And we request that the mayor and council request that the County Department of Environmental Protection include our own arborists and engineers' reports in the environmental impact assessment it has been asked to do. Its assessment will be more informed and credible if it includes input beyond what the WSSC can contribute, especially input from the city's own experts. We ask that WSSC not take any steps that would be irrevocable until the county DEP report is available and its implications considered by all parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's okay, because I know, that's fine. I can't read it that fast.
Sorry, Ms. Lowe, if you give it to us, we can
Yeah.
we can make copies for
We're
everyone on the
just
city
concerned
council.
that easement agreements are progressing, and we have heard from homeowners, a number, that there's confusion still.
Right, and just to give an update, Councilmember Qureshi and I have been working with Senator Raskin's office and County Councilmember Hans Remer's office. A letter has gone to the general manager of WSSC, who actually responded within a week, saying that the information that has not been forthcoming so far from WSSC to DEP, she's looking into the issue. We have requested a meeting with WSSC, particularly with the residents on Westmoreland, so their questions can be answered before the end of the month of June. WSSC said they would have the meeting. We were just pushing to get that done before the end of June. And I know that we're also looking into, Senator Raskin's office was looking into an answer to the question about the easements and when that process was moving forward. And as soon as we have information, we will share it with all of you. Okay?
But basically, they won't start cutting trees before homeowners
we're
get one more
collecting
chance.
information. I know we have gotten back to you about sitting down and having a meeting and going through that, and I think that would be a better process for that. So if you can, if you want to hand us or email us your information, that'd be great. All right, any other public comments this evening?
Hi, good evening. I'm Elizabeth Wallace. Just a quick comment regarding agenda item 10. I'm very much for the extension of the owner-occupied group house registration. However, I have sent information to Peter Kovar and other city council members, and it's been well received, having had the experience of being registered. But I think there's probably a large variety of group houses, and I think there's a lot of people who don't self-identify as a group house, even though they might fall under this category. And I think a really good, proactive, educational effort needs to be initiated to make sure everybody's accounted for. And also perhaps even just a workshop or informal get-together. I think there's probably more than 26 owner-occupied group homes, and it would be really interesting to see what the different challenges and nuances are of those group homes, because they're very, very different. So I look forward to the possibility that you'll be proactive that way. Thank you.
Any other public comments this evening? All right, then we'll move on to council comments. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I just wanted to note that there was a portion of Ritchie Avenue today and for a portion of the day that it didn't rain. I think that's noteworthy.
It was just Thank you.
I wanted to thank the city manager for the work that's being done along Maple Avenue. I know it's very difficult with traffic, but it's going to be well worth it. They're doing sidewalk upgrades for accessibility. And then I assume that it's going to be followed with the implementation of the new crosswalks, which will be raised crosswalks, again, for pedestrian safety in this high pedestrian area. I also just wanted to say that I joined some of my colleagues on the council at the Celebrate Tacoma Festival this weekend. And even though it was a rainy day, it was very successful. They moved it indoors. And I'm not sure that it lost anything by moving indoors. It was a very nice festival. I think it was well organized. I wanted to compliment Jen Wolford for her work on organizing it. And I just encourage the community next year to come out and see it if you weren't there this year. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
I didn't light up.
Oh, well. Do you have anything to say tonight? No? All right. Councilmember Smith?
Another noteworthy event.
I think Councilmember Qureshi was before me.
Okay. Councilmember Qureshi.
Thank you. I'm not going to decline the invitation to speak. Just a couple notes to the ladies who are here from the Tree Commission. I should also note, in addition to the mayor's comments, I attended a meeting 2 weeks ago with residents on Westmoreland and Eastern, a lengthy meeting, and have been in constant communication with the folks who are impacted by this. And as you know, there's not much, there's a clear concern here, but there also isn't consensus necessarily in the community. But I think we share your concerns about it being an open and transparent process whereby people are making informed decisions about a clear need that's, I think, central to our community and our character, which is about our trees and our tree canopy and its impact. So rest assured that the mayor and I are working a lot behind the scenes currently before we go into some public fashion, which may be warranted in the future, to address this issue, which we have at the top of our priority list. The only other thing that I wanted to raise was the Ward 3, I'm going to announce tonight, is going to have an awesome meeting, a community meeting. Although the folks in Pinecrest, which is where I reside, think it's going to be closer to their home, but we're going to be meeting at a great establishment called the VFW down on June 6th at approximately 6:30 p.m., which is a tentative date. It's open to anybody in the community, but it's a community meeting to talk about issues that are important to folks. So if you're interested, and I would ask the mayor, a fellow Ward 3 resident, to join as well. But that's June 6th at 6:30. Thank you.
Now, Councilmember Smith?
Well, I have a number of things that I want to announce and discuss. One, I would like to echo my colleague regarding Celebrate Tacoma. It was a fantastic event. Greg Clark, Jen Wofford, and everyone else that helped put it on did an incredible job. I would say that this is the best one yet. I hope next year we can do it inside the school again, even if it is not raining. The attendance was great. The activities provided for residents were incredible. And even the dental screening, I think, went very well. So I just want to thank everybody involved in that. The mayor, Jamie Raskin, and I, and even Councilmember Qureshi attended the Parents' Night at Tacoma Nursery on Sunday, I believe it was. It was a great evening. A lot of parents came out with their kids. But one thing that I would hope that the city manager can talk to the headmaster of the school, they are interested in purchasing or leasing space at the Washington Adventist Hospital campus. I would hope that we could help them in some way. There is going to be a lot of vacant space, and as much as we can get that absorbed would be great for the community. And this school has been around for a long, long time in the city. It is an institution in itself, and I think that we should try to support it any way we can.
And Councilmember Smith, just to correct you, I wasn't there as Councilmember Qureshi. I was there as Dad.
I didn't know that there was a difference.
Yeah, I was there as Dad.
Thank you. No, I'm not done. It's a little long tonight. All right. This afternoon, I went to the Transportation Planning Board for Council of Governments. I want to thank staff for all their hard work on a couple projects that were mentioned. We didn't have much to do with the Transit Center, the Langley Transit Center, but it was brought up. It will go online at the end of the summer. They believe that MTA believes that it's going to be done by June, but then it has to be transferred to WMATA. WMATA has to do their own punch list on it, and so hopefully that's going to only take 60 days. It will hopefully be open by September. There was a mention about the Tacoma Park New Avenue Bikeway, that the city received $60,000, so that was very nice.
I don't think that's been publicly announced before.
All
So
right.
we'll get the word out.
Well, there you go.
That's on New Hampshire Avenue.
Yes, New Hampshire Avenue. The other thing is there was a briefing on the Purple Line. Right now, the state believes that the fee to use the light rail system will be $2. The difference compared to WMATA is it's a flat fee. It's not based on distance or, other issue that they hope to resolve is how to integrate it with the Smart Trip card, right? Because it's going to connect with the Red Line. So we don't want people to have a bunch of cards. We want just one. So I think WMATA, their representative was there. The state was there. And so they are going to, I guess, put together something so that we have just one system to use the rail line. And people are very excited to see that the Purple Line gets built and people eventually get to use it. All right, switching gears. Many of you know Mike Tabor. He's a farmer that lives in Tacoma Park. He is opening up his farm on May 22nd to Tacoma Park residents. It is in Pennsylvania, so it's a little trip, but my understanding it's very beautiful. I haven't been, but it's really pretty. Some of the workshops he's going to have are he's going to give a tour of his fruit trees. He's going to talk about organic no-till farming, and there will be a little discussion on edible weeds. So if you want more information, please don't hesitate to contact me, but it should be a great event. And let's see. And I am going to be presenting and moderating an event on May 24th, hosted by Choose Clean Water. The topic is going to be local government policy implementation, making resilient changes for stormwater. That's going to be in Annapolis. So we're trying to figure out how we can stream it on social media, whether it's on Facebook Live or Twitter. But once that becomes available, I'll let residents know. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. I've mentioned a few times in the past, and the council has been supportive of this in our ongoing work to try to have more consultation around the master plan relative to construction in the North Tacoma neighborhood as part of the work of Montgomery College. And I think I mentioned that the mayor and I and the city manager were at a meeting with President Pollard of the college last month. What grew out of that was a letter that we did a day or two ago, and I thank Deputy City Manager Dan Weber for helping get it out the door, and the mayor for signing it. And that was to President Pollard urging or laying out a framework for what we hope could be a consultation process relating to the construction plans for that area going forward. We don't know how it's going to be resolved, but that's the next phase in this. And just one other point on that, I was looking online at the requirements for mandatory referral, which is the process in the county for ensuring that building plans and the like are properly vetted before they go forward. And one of the sort of differences of opinion between us and the college is the extent to which the plans in the master plan should have gone or should go through the mandatory referral process. So that's one of those things that people are continuing to talk about. What's interesting is if you go to the website for the county planning and you type in mandatory referral, a little thing pops up and you can read about what's mandatory referral. And there's a photo there, and the photo is of the Silver Spring Tacoma Park campus of Montgomery County. So as in technical legislative language, it goes, I'm just saying. So then that's of interest to people, maybe. I'm just going to mention for the city manager, there's apparently, actually not apparently, I saw there's some graffiti on the switch box at the intersection of Philadelphia and Maple. You can actually probably see it from this building. And it was sent in by a resident of Ward 1. They haven't heard back. It's been a few weeks, so maybe somebody could just do something about that. I think people have on their tables some stuff about, some information about the Village of Tacoma Park, which was dropped off. I helped get that organized, and I urge people to think about joining it. It's a great group, and that includes council members who they're trying to get to join it. And then last, I want to also double echo, or echo the comments on Celebrate Tacoma, which was a really great event, and in particular, the awards that were given out for all the people who made these amazing contributions, and even being nominated, the array of nominees and winners, that sort of epitomized what's great about the city. So it's just a great thing to be able to observe. Thank you.
Councilmember Mel?
Thank you. First, I wanted to ask in regards to the WSSC project. To the extent to which that there are easements being negotiated, I wonder if we could potentially provide a service to residents in understanding or getting more information on what fair prices WSSC has offered for other people in other parts of the county or state or metro area when they are securing easements. That's the sort of thing that people may not be aware of, how much something like that is worth, and it could be an important public service. Our attorney could look at it, or I'm assuming some of the records that WSSC has for spending their budget may shed some light on that. Second, I wanted to thank city staff, particularly Public Works Department, for the awesome work on sidewalks. I went and walked the new sidewalks on Cherry Avenue and the little block on Elm Avenue, where you can now go from a corner to an existing sidewalk. Really nice to have those projects complete, and just very excited to see that. And then I wanted to add that, and Councilmember Qureshi is on the email as well, but the artist Michael Kirby, who we have selected to do the mural in Ward 2 over near New Hampshire Avenue, reached out to residents, and I think is trying to do the right thing in terms of setting up community meetings, and I'd like to help facilitate that process. So if there's somebody on staff that I can work with, try to set up a meeting, one or more meetings in the neighborhood, and potentially have this building as a backup in case of rain, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
I did think of something. Disappoint everybody. This past Sunday, I and several of my colleagues up here had the opportunity to attend an open house reception at Republic Restaurant for the Crossroads Community Food Network to celebrate the soon-to-be thank you, Councilmember Qureshi. To celebrate the soon-to-be open Crossroads Farmers Market, which will begin operation this year on June 1st. And it'll be at the same place on Ann Street, same time on Wednesdays from 11 to 3. This year, the market will have 20 vendors. Many of them will be completely new to the market, as well as many of the ones that have been there in the past. So it was quite a turnout, a mob of people at the Republic Restaurant, and they raised a lot of money through the silent auction. So there's a good deal of support within the city in favor of the Crossroads Market. I want you, therefore, to know about it and to encourage you to attend it. Lots of interesting vendors, and each year it grows and gets bigger and bigger, and I'm really pleased about it. It's one of the very few markets, I am told, in the United States that is predominantly attended by low to moderate income customers. And that is one of its great achievements. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, Councilmember Schultz, opening day for the market is June 1st. Yep. So mark your calendars. Yep. So, I just have a couple of announcements. On Monday, Councilmember Smith and I attended the Montgomery County Affordable Housing Conference. and it was a very good morning. I'm happy to say that even though we haven't quite finished our budget and we have the second reading tonight of our housing reserve, that word has spread, and people are very excited about the fact that Tacoma Park is going to have a housing reserve fund and focus on affordable housing, and it has gotten the attention of a number of folks at the county level, so that's good news. Last evening, I attended in Silver Spring event that was put on by a number of groups. Chief Manger was there, the chief of Montgomery County, a number of other police officers talking about sort of post-Ferguson and policing in Montgomery County. One of the things that they talked about is, and Ms. Machui brings up, is dealing with mental health and developmental delayed individuals. And I know we raised this with our chief when he was here a number of months ago, and he doesn't have to do an oral presentation, but maybe in one of the city manager's updates, we could follow up on some of the items that we asked him to look into regarding that. And then the other thing, just to remind folks that starting on May 30th through June 3rd, we will be visited by the Tiny House Lab Tour. It is put on by the TV and film personalities Corbett and Grace Lunsford. It will be in the parking lot, the Tacoma Junction lot next to the co-op. There will be tours and showing you how you can make a energy efficient house. There's tours for the public and workshops and other things, and you can check it out on the website. I think it's going to be really cool. And then my final thing this evening, Joyce Siemens is once again putting on the Single Mothers Tea in Tacoma Park. This year it will be held on Sunday, June 26th from 3 to 5 p.m. And if you would like more information, please call Joyce at 240-723-5650. And if you have more information, I can give that to you as well. I think that's all I have this evening. Does the city manager have comments?
Yes, a couple things. One is Councilmember Mail noted that SHA hadn't updated its page on the Carroll Avenue Bridge, and voila, they've now updated their page. Mm-hmm. So we do have up-to-date information on that side. I will say that we're likely to have more up-to-date information on a continuing basis, but obviously it is their responsibility to keep that up. On tomorrow night, we have a special third Thursday event featuring all three of Tacoma Park's poet laureates, and the council members are invited. There's going to be selected works read from each of the poets, followed by a short discussion of the Poet Laureate program. There'll be a reception, and then I think the mayor's going to read a poem or two. Mm-hmm. And the celebration will begin at 7:30 here in the auditorium. So you're invited to attend that. It sounds really nice. There's been lots of information about Bike to Work Day on Friday. And there's many things going on. And hopefully you've signed up to ride your bike or show up at a pit stop. Wanted to mention that the Friends of the Library book sale is this Saturday. They're not even going to pretend that it's not going to rain. They're going to be inside. so they just will be in the computer area as well as in the lilac and rose rooms and the hallways around there. So from 10 to 3, come to the library book sale. Once again, this is bike related, the I Can Shine camp is going to be held, and I mean, for those who were familiar with that last year, it is cool. And you can see some of the video from the participants from last year. This is a special camp that provides students with special needs who are between the ages of 8 and 14 the ability to help them ride a bike independently. And it's got special equipment to do that. The kids and families are thrilled with the independence that comes from learning to ride a bike. We're looking for people to pass the word to people who maybe have children that would want to take that class, as also looking for assistance for the riders, because I think there's 2 people with each child his bike, learning how to get balanced and that kind of thing. And so it does require about a week's worth of volunteer time. And we do have information on our Safe Routes to School part of the website. Just wanted to mention that Memorial Day will be Monday, May 30th, and city facilities will be closed. The newsletter didn't also mention that we're also closed on Sunday. So I just want to be clear, we're closed Sunday the 29th and Monday the 30th for the holiday. And I know we've heard some nice things about the Celebrate Tacoma, but I was very pleased to hear all of the championing of how to move things inside, get that arranged, and it did sound really great. I wasn't here, but I heard secondhand that it was just a blast. That's it.
Thank you very much. All right, now we'll move on to our voting session. The first item we have is a second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2017 tax rate. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Second.
That was Councilmember Smith and Councilmember Siemens, I think. Second. Any discussion?
One brief
Yeah.
comment. I do want to make sure, and Mr. Silverman mentioned it again, that while we are not getting to the inventory tax at this time, that we agreed to look very seriously at that for the next time round once we gather all the data.
Great. Okay. Any other comments? All right. This is a second reading ordinance, so the clerk wants to call the roll.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Aye.
Councilmember Mail?
No.
Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Smith? Stewart?
Yes.
Promoted.
Yeah. Those S's.
Promotion.
All right. Now the council will vote to convene as the Stormwater Management Board. Who'd like to move that motion?
So moved.
All right, Councilmember Mail, second. Councilmember Siemens, all in favor of convening as the Stormwater Management Board, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right, we are now the Stormwater Management Board. We have the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2017 Stormwater Management Budget. Would someone like...
And I would just mention
Okay.
that the title is correct with the correct fiscal year. It was wrong in the first reading. So that's something that I mentioned, that there was a typo, and that's what it was. It's been corrected.
Oh. Did you keeping us on our toes?
Keeping us on-
All right. Would someone like to move the Stormwater Management Budget?
So moved.
Councilmember Mail, second. Councilmember Siemens, any discussion or questions? No? Would the clerk like to call a vote?
Councilmember Schultz?
Pardon? Aye. Aye. Sorry.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Aye.
Councilmember Mail?
Aye.
Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Aye. All right, our next voting item is the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2017 budget. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Councilmember Qureshi, Councilmember Schultz, seconded. Any discussion or comments?
Just to note that information about the 5-year bonding schedule has been included both in the cover memo and as an attachment.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. Would the clerk like to call the vote?
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Aye.
Councilmember Mail?
Nay.
Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. All right, the next is the second reading ordinance establishing a housing reserve fund. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
I'll
second it.
All right, I got
I'll second
Councilmember Smith moving it, and Councilmember Kovar seconding. Any questions or comments? No? Would the clerk like to call the vote, please?
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Aye.
Councilmember Mail?
Aye.
Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Aye. All right, next we have the second reading ordinance approving the franchise agreement with Comcast. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Councilmember Smith, a second.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Schultz, second. Any comments or questions, or the city manager would like to say anything?
This is the same as come before, and then I'll speak to the next item.
Okay.
Just a brief.
Councilmember Kovar, yeah.
And again, I just want to mention that we talked some about taking a deeper dive into the PEG funding at some point, which isn't relevant to this vote now, but I just want to make sure that stays on the agenda at some point. Thanks.
All right. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Aye.
Councilmember Mayo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kovar?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. All right, then the next item, there's two, the resolutions giving direction of the cable memorandums of understanding with Montgomery County. And does the city manager want to give some background on this?
Yes. So in order to implement and carry out the details of the franchise agreement with Comcast, a resolution needs to be passed to sign, giving direction to sign a memorandum of understanding, I guess a memorandum of agreement with Montgomery County on how that implementation takes place. We have had agreements on the three cable franchises for some time. The new two agreements, one with Comcast, one with Verizon, are very similar to those past agreements. They, just as the past time, the city receives 70% of the franchise fees. 30% of the fees go to Montgomery County to pay for administration of the franchise, which involves a lot of consumer advocacy work that they do. They make sure that the corporations adhere to the franchise agreement terms, and then they distribute the funds that are received. For the Comcast agreement, it provides for a channel for use by the city of Tacoma Park, as well as shared access with other municipalities of an HD channel. From Verizon, we get 5 free drops for cable service for public buildings. Then for the new provision in these resolutions and these agreements has to do with the distribution of the PEG capital grant. And normally, well, we get most of that money from the Verizon franchise, the way that kind of the numbers of subscribers and the way that it's divided works. So the provision in these agreements say that from Verizon, 1/30th of the PEG capital grant that is restricted to capital purchases, and from Comcast we get 1/9 of the PEG capital grant funds, which may be used for either capital or operating expenses. And in either case, the funds can only be used for cable purposes, PEG purposes, or institutional network purposes. So that's the reason that we can give some of this money for operating expenses for IT-related work, because they help us support the infrastructure for the cable television system. So the primary change from the past agreements is this PEG capital grant distribution. The two agreements work together to allow us to use most of this or all for operating grant purposes. The smaller amount of capital grant money that we would get that can only be used for capital purposes is still sufficient to completely replace all of our equipment, all of our wires, every 5 years. That's in addition to the $3 million or so that's in the bank for those purposes. So under the new Comcast franchise agreement, we would have only, well, I'll just cut to the chase on the fiscal impact. What this does is that we gain $409,000 each year in cable-related operating funds, and we lose $714,000 in cable-related capital funds. That's the difference from the past agreements. We've not been able to use the capital monies, and so this allows us to move from about $200,000 to close to $500,000 of operating monies that we use and do need to use. So in what we've got here is that, well, let me just go back. One other important part of this is that the 30% of the franchise fee money is also goes towards the cost of negotiating future franchise agreements, which is an expensive and time-consuming and staff-intensive process. However, in the MOAs, it has a statement that says that the municipalities recognize that that's what this money is for. They don't say that the county will do it. When all of the staff say, of course the county staff is going to do it, so what I have done is added in a provision a whereas provision in each of these resolutions that says, whereas the council understands that the county executive recognizes that negotiation of franchise agreements is part of the administration service for which Tacoma Park and other municipalities pay 30% of the franchise fees pursuant to this agreement, and expects that this function will continue for the duration of the agreement. And so those are in both of those portions. It's part of, it is something that I talked with our cable-related counsel on, and she recommended this provision be put into the two resolutions. And so I put them forward for I recommend approval of these resolutions.
Mayor, can I just ask one question? Can you elaborate on what's a drop? You said there are 5 drops.
It's a way to be able to have a video connection,
okay,
basically.
And that's all the properties the city...
Yeah, we're able to get between Verizon, Comcast, and RCN quite a few connections for either television services or primarily or internet services. And so we get more internet related from RCN, and we get a little bit more just video kinds of things from Comcast and Verizon, and we try to get the right amount so that we can use it for public safety purposes. We can have conference meetings that are public safety related. So there's, we've, in the negotiations, we tried to advocate to make sure that all of our facilities are connected and have the options for those services.
And under the new agreement, can you just touch on how we're going to spend the money that we have now? My understanding is we're going to spend it on personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be separate from how we normally fund things.
Right. In the past, the money, the vast bulk of the money was just capital related. Right. So, we can do work in the auditorium, we can do wiring and cameras and that kind of thing, but we can't pay for the staff to do the work. And so, and that's where we really needed it as an ongoing responsibility. So what the change in the Comcast agreement allows us to do is to flex out the capital funds for operating funds. Obviously, we can use those same funds for capital purchases if we want, but we are allowed in this to use it for operating.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kovar?
And just a continuation on that point. So that means more money is available to pay staff
That's right.
than was previously?
Absolutely.
So is that, does that a savings potentially for our regular budget?
It's part of why
otherwise?
your budget comes out to the way it is, because I built that in. In the past, it could pay for about 3 people, and now we're paying about 7 people with those funds.
Okay.
And I just had one question. I know you added the whereas clause to talk about the future legal negotiation, and then there's a second one that talks about the reimbursement for the legal fees.
That's right.
Does it make sense to also talk about that the expectation is in the future the county will do that, or?
That's actually a good question.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, the cable companies paid for it.
Okay.
Comcast refused to pay for it this time, and that seems to be the way that the different cable franchises are going, to not pay for the legal fees. In this case, because Comcast had a settlement agreement in addition to its main franchise agreement, there was some language in this. There was money that went to the county as part of a settlement agreement that the county agreed to pay for the municipality's legal costs. Mm-hmm. And so I think we should continue to insist on that. I think it should come out of the 30%, frankly, that they already get. But I'll follow up with that and see if there's something that makes some sense. And if so, we could amend this and then send it back.
Okay. Great. All right. Any other questions or anything? No. All right. Would someone like to move the resolution?
We need to do them separately.
So, I'm sorry, I forgot there were two, right. So the first one is the resolution authorizing agreement with Verizon cable franchise. Does someone like to move that one?
So moved.
Councilmember Kovar, second.
Second.
Councilmember Smith. All those in favor of the resolutions, please say aye. The resolution 6A with the Verizon cable franchise, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
2 opposed, and I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes. Anyone abstaining? No. Okay. Next is the resolution authorizing an agreement with the Montgomery County concerning the Comcast cable franchise. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Councilmember Smith, a second.
Second.
Councilmember Kovar, second. Any conversation or anything on that one? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed. Opposed as well.
2 opposed. Any abstaining? No. So we have 5 yeses, 2 opposed. And that's it on those. And here's our city attorney. Right on cue. Wonderful. Now we will move on to the first reading ordinance amending our Tacoma Park Code to restrict the commercial use of plastic single-use carryout bags.
Okay. I'll start with just a summary of the ordinance that's in front of you. It prohibits retailers from providing disposable plastic carryout bags at the point of sale. Those are the bags that, if you're shopping in Montgomery County, you have to pay 5 cents for. It allows retailers to provide certified compostable plastic bags inside the store for bulk purchases, for damp items like frozen foods and potted plants. And the ordinance exempts farmers market vendors for the first year after it's enacted. It calls for the council to revisit the ordinance every 2 years to determine if it's having adverse impacts on consumers or retailers, or if technology has changed such that there are new alternatives to plastic bags where we're still allowing them. Based on, and I heard some public comments tonight talking about concerns about compostable plastic bags, and from the meeting and what I've heard from council members, I think there may have been some confusion and certainly some concern about the inside the store bulk purchase bags. So I guess I'd like to kind of put on the table 3 possibilities as to how we regulate those inside the store bulk bags. And I think the council is pretty clear and settled on what we do with point of sale bags. So we're only talking about bulk bags here. And the 3 options that I see are what's on the table right on the proposed ordinance right now, which would allow only compostable plastic bulk bags, or paper would still be allowed. The second, or another alternative, is to not regulate inside the store bags. Essentially, our policy for those types of bags would be the same as in Montgomery County. Retailers can use plastic, paper, compostable plastic, whatever they want. And then the third alternative would be to say no inside the store bulk purchase plastic bags. Retailers would have to would only be able to provide paper bags for that purpose. So I think that is something that's worth you all considering tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. Ken, thank you for coming tonight and giving us the latest information. In a perfect world, I would love option 3, to just say we're going to take all plastic out of the system, force retailers, grocers to use paper. But I don't know if that is realistic after hearing testimony and reading comments regarding compostable bags. I think compostable bags are a problem when it comes to recycling, and I don't want to make it so inconvenient for shoppers to just have the option of paper when it comes to bulk items. So I would have to say that I would go with option 2. Maybe we can put some type of language in the ordinance that says that we would like for grocers, vendors to look for alternatives, but I don't think at this time we should mandate anything.
What's 2 again? I'm sorry. Option 2 is which?
You can use basically whatever.
But for the inside?
Yes, for the
bulk and raw.
Bulk, yes.
I may have changed the order of the options from when I emailed you. So the first one I read tonight, which I believe Jared supports, which is don't regulate the inside of the store bags, would be option 1 of the 3 that I just read.
Option 1 then.
Yeah, we are. I was thinking of his email.
I'm sorry, I thought I was putting them in a more logical order, but I just confused you all by changing the order.
All right, option 1.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
I'll just say that I'll agree with what Councilmember Smith just said. Whether it's option B or option 1, I don't know anymore. I think basically the ordinance would be best if it was completely silent on the subject of compostable plastic bags, just make no reference to it whatsoever. I'm opposed to the idea of our requiring, or as you said, allowing, which is really what you're saying, is requiring businesses to use compostables, because those are problematic. It's an unfair burden. And the problem with paper bags is that technology today with scanners basically prevents that. The advantage of clear plastic bulk bags is that when you put your produce in the bag, the scanner can read through the plastic to the sticker that's on the produce, or and be able to know what kind of apples you're buying, for example. They can't do that if it's inside a paper bag. So while we'd all love to go back to the good old days, it's not going to work. So that's where I'm at on all of this.
Councilmember Mel?
Thank you. Just adding a little bit of background, I'd note that Mom's Market, Organic Market, eliminated plastic bags from their stores in 2005, 10 years ago. There are 62,000 hits on farmers markets eliminate plastic bags, with the earliest farmers markets eliminating plastic bags back in 2009, 6 years ago. And so I would just state my preference is that we, as Councilmember Smith said, move as aggressively as possible to reduce plastic bags use within businesses in the community. I'm not going beyond, I think, where our discussions have gone before. I agree with Councilmember Schultz, or at least he's the last one who said it, that not requiring compostable is a good idea. And the last thing I want to suggest is that is potentially the benefit of having a city attorney bring together a meeting of Julie Lawson from Trash Free Maryland with representation from the Business Association or the Farmers Market. Laura Barclay is in particular who I'm thinking about. See if they can come up with something that they agree on that would help us get past this. But I just go back to my default is something far closer to comprehensive action than the exemptions we've talked about. And again, I'd note all the past experience. We're not leaders. We're not the first to go here. Our farmers markets wouldn't be the first. Our local grocery stores wouldn't be the first. Our fast food places probably wouldn't be the first.
If I may, I would just like to add that during the meeting, I've reached out to Julie Lawson, and she's more than willing to sit down with Laura Barkley and work out something.
Okay. So Councilmember Mail, you're for option 1 as well as Councilmember Smith and Schultz. Is that correct?
I don't even know the difference, but if you say so, yes.
Yeah. All right.
Can we just rehash the options one more time?
Yeah, why don't you say them out loud for the audience?
The first option is do not regulate inside the store plastic bags. The retailers can provide whatever bags they want. The second option would be regulate inside the store bags and prohibit regular plastic bags and allow only compostable plastic bags or paper bags. And the third would be regulate inside the store bags and prohibit any type of plastic and allow only paper.
So I'm really confused now because I thought that what my colleagues were saying was that they didn't want any plastic, and yet they kept pointing to number 1, and that was the one that says you're not going to regulate it at all.
I think what they're saying is
That's inside the store.
Inside the store.
Well, so
they would like no plastic, but at this point, the logical choice is not to regulate inside the store bags.
I'm for. I think what you're referring to is in the store, meaning not at the cash register.
Right, like produce bags.
Produce bags. I'm actually for regulating bags at the bulk aisles as well. Personally, if we could go there, that's where I would go. And I'm closer to something that I don't think was described in either 2 or 3, which is to not prohibit. Neither the way you described 2 and 3 did not include the option to allow compostable, but not require or prohibit it. It would essentially be silent on to allow compostable, but not to require compostable. So compostable would be a way to achieve that. I didn't hear that when you described it.
That would be
You're
part
not
of the
regulating it.
first option.
Because you're not regulating it.
What
So
about
they
number
can do
3
whatever
that
they
says
want.
no plastic bags? That's it. Don't say
I'm sorry,
more.
but number 1 was no regulation of plastic bags of any kind. But wait.
No regulation
let me
of
back up.
inside the store
Compostable are not made out of plastic, right? Plastic is a petrochemical product that comes from oil. Compostable comes from biomaterials. It comes from corn. It comes from other products. So distinguishing compostable non-plastic bags from plastic bags. Where are we there?
The only thing we're talking about right now is the bulk item. So the plastic bags or the bags, paper or whatever, that you would use to put your fruit in or other things or wet items. Okay. That's the section we're talking about now. So, right?
Right.
Got it.
And Tim, where you may be confused.
There's nothing to prevent those bags from being compostable if a particular store wishes to, under option 1.
Option 1, right, because we're not regulating those types of bags.
Correct.
So that's why I said I thought you were 1.
Okay. Tim, I think the reason you're confused, and this was news to me a week or 2 ago, is there are compostable plastic bags. They're plant-based.
Right. So they're not plastic.
They're not plastic, but they look like.
Well, they call them plastic apparently, though, right?
You okay?
Just
sure.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, I can't go with your numbers because I don't understand them, and I'm not sure that the council has a common understanding of what you're saying. I want to see for the bulk bags, for the bulk products, which are inside the store until the customer takes them out of the store, that they not be petrochemical-based bags, okay? They can use paper, they can use compostable, whatever, but not petro-based bags.
Okay. That would be option 2 on
That'd be
this
option
list.
2. Right. And I'll just say for the record, I would agree with Councilmember Siemens and go with option 2 as well on this one.
I'm not sure, but we maybe have other votes down the aisle. When,
Mayor, I would just note the same thing. I'm with option 2 as well. So
And
that
I'm with option 1.
Okay. So if we do it that way, then option 1 has 4 votes. That is not regulated. So we're talking about the bulk items. So if we look at the the actual ordinance.
I'm sorry, I'm not positive where Tim is.
I was going to just go review that. So
Okay.
right. Yeah. So that's why I thought we would look at the ordinance and make sure that we are all looking at the same thing. Right.
My battery just died, so I'm going to look over your shoulder.
Okay. So we're looking at, I believe,
The clean version?
the version that we had in our packets.
I was trying to agree with Mr. Mail, except in words that I understood.
Can you give us the numbers, Tim, where we should be?
Right now, we're discussing lines 40. If you look at the clean version of the ordinance for first reading, that's the second one in the packet. It's lines 46 through
70?
Through
69?
60, really.
Yeah.
And what it does right now is it says it doesn't apply to these inside the store bags, that's A, that meet this STM D6400 standard, which essentially means that they're plant-based, or plastics, if you will, that they're certified for compostability, and then that what they're used for is D.
I'm fine with that language, just to be clear.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Then that would be option 2.
Right.
And
So-
Mayor, if I may just note.
Yeah.
I would just note, and Ken, I know you emailed the council about this and myself, but I think the way D reads now is much better. Thank you
Okay,
for that
good.
change.
Okay.
If I might, just, do you want to keep under, on line 48, apply to compostable plastic bags, or just take out plastic? I mean, that starts to add a weird twist to it.
Compostable bags, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so are we saying then the exception would be, this section does not apply to plastic bags that, and jump right to D? Is that what-
Compostable bags that.
Right.
Paper's compostable.
Yeah,
But paper isn't going to meet those standards, is it?
Right, I would suggest not making that.
Okay, so are plastic type bags or something? It just seems weird to me. to
But
have
what's good,
plastic.
and the reason it's important to be specific is there are plastic bags that they call compostable that are petrochemical based and really aren't compostable at all.
And I guess that's part of the problem is, how do we make sure that, because then the enforcement would be much higher, much more will be required for city staff to go and to the vendors and say, hey, you guys have to sell this type of bag, and we have to look and make sure that this is the type of bag that you're selling, rather than saying that we would prefer that you don't sell these bags and leave it up to the vendor to, make that decision. But I think it's going to be much more difficult to enforce.
Well, my research indicates that they are labeled, and this requires that they be labeled with this logo of certification. So it should be enforceable.
Right.
It definitely adds a layer to what the city's doing.
I'll just add that when I looked this up as well, in terms of, like, again, thinking about the role of bags that people pull off to then put their apples and things in, it shows on all the vendors who sell them, it shows this number.
Right.
And has it clearly marked. And
Right.
I believe the co-op is already doing this.
The point I'm trying to make is we have to actually send someone in to look for that label to make sure it's there. That's all I'm saying.
Councilmember Schultz and then Mail.
Well, if we adopt the clean copy of what's here, then we're all basically saying we want option 2, which is not what I said. And I thought we had 4 votes for doing option 1, which is just to be silent about compostable bags for this edition, for this ordinance, understanding that in the future we can amend it to change it. Either we're talking about compostable bags or we're not talking about compostable bags.
Right. I counted 3 votes: Jarrett, Fred, and Peter for the first option. Did I miss anybody?
I switched my vote, Fred.
Tim switched.
Okay.
By accident, I voted for the other option the first time.
And
Okay.
my suggestion.
So, can I finish?
Yeah.
Yep, please.
What Councilmember Smith is saying is that when you keep these exceptions in there, you're basically saying to retail establishments that sell things like bulk food, wet stuff like pickles, fish, certain meats, flowers that come from florists, cut flowers and things like that, is that you have to use this kind of certain kind of compostable bag. But we just heard over tonight again, and what we've learned is that they aren't really compostable. They are not biodegradable. They don't just blow around in the countryside and deteriorate under UV rays or in salt water or fresh water. They have to be collected and processed in machinery. And the testimony we heard this tonight basically said that according to the Natural Resources Environmental Council, whatever it's called, is that this kind of plastic messes up the recyclable plastic because it's a different product altogether, so it doesn't work. So I'm really confused as to what it is we hope to gain by requiring the groceries, most of which are very small in this city, by the way, to use compostable bags, because that just simply makes the law more complicated to understand. I mean, we don't even we're not even sure what what we're approving, and it requires enforcement. And I just think it's needless at this point in time. Other than the Aldi and the Mega Mart and the Co-op, all of the groceries, those are the only 3 grocery stores of any size whatsoever in the city. The rest of them are like butchers that serve halal meats, or the Caribbean market, or the businesses that sell African produce and foods, or Ethiopian, like the Shager Market on East-West Highway, little ones like that. And they're all on University Boulevard and New Hampshire Avenue. And so basically, that's who we're dealing with. And most of those businesses are really small, little bit one-of-a-kind businesses. Sure, the Aldis of this world, they can probably afford to do this. Just think we need to be a little more careful about imposing a kind of environmental thing that's apparently questionable as to its actual environmental value. Thank you.
I'll just jump in here and just say, to answer Councilmember Schultz, the 3 reasons I'm actually for this version is that the compostable bags do degrade faster in the environment than regular plastic bags. There is no, at the moment, recycling of plastic bags.
That's right.
It doesn't happen, so it's putting
Nobody's
these...
going to recycle compostable bags either.
except that they degrade faster. And the third reason is because we do have curbside food waste pickup, you can use these bags in your curbside pickup.
I'm not saying we can't allow people to sell those bags.
No, but I'm telling you the
And
reason
so
why
consumers
I
can use them.
Right, but I'm saying in my own life, my own practice, when I go to the co-op and I get when they have the bag that I can put the apples in, when I go home, I take my apples out and then I save that bag and I put it in my curbside recycling, so I don't have to purchase the compostable bag.
But is that because as a typical consumer, let's say, want to do that, does that mean that it's fair then to require all the grocers in the city to use those kind of bags?
And I would say my goal would be to get us to point 3, which is no plastic bags at all, and I see this as an incremental step there. And I would hope in maybe a couple of years when we revisit this, that we're even closer to that. So just wanted to say that was my reason. I'm not going to know who is in order here, so I'm just going to start with Councilmember Kovar and work our way this way.
Thanks. So just, I think I know the different numbers are confusing, but I think I'm where Fred is on this also, just based on the email from Julia Lawson with Trash Free Maryland and also the comments of Tanya DeCona, who wasn't able to stay. It sounds like the compostable option might actually have a negative effect, because Ms. DeCona sent me a note saying that the local Safeway manager says they do send the plastic bags out to be recycled. So I'm just a little worried that if that's true, and then these get sent, we could actually have a counterproductive result. So I think without really knowing that for sure, I think we're potentially doing something that could even be counterproductive.
If I may, I would just then add that maybe the best way to go is to keep it simple at this point in time. And when and if we learn more about the compostability and the degradability of certain kinds of bags over others, like plant-based bags, then we can amend the ordinance and add that in. But at this point in time, I don't, there's all the evidence points to the fact that they mess up landfills, create methane, and require special machinery to convert them.
Councilmember Mail.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest some changes, and just bear with me, colleagues. I wonder if it wouldn't be better to revise the section B to have one section which is disposable plastic bag limits at the point of sale, and then another section that is disposable plastic bag limits before point of sale. And then we could really clearly describe, if you're at the register, what happens. And I think we know, generally we agree on where we are on that. Mm-hmm. We don't want plastic, and we're also not supporting compostable at that point. Mm-hmm. So that's very clear. That section would be very brief. It would presumably include number 2, which is the section does not prohibit sale of bags, essentially. Right. That part, I think, is easy. And it's then clear to the businesses. And then in the section that's about prior to point of sale, we have some of the gnarly issues that we're talking about now around compostable, yes or no, et cetera. And I'm not going to just jump into that piece right now, but the other change that I might suggest is to move the language around the definition of compostable plastic into the definition section. So the 2 pieces that I see or maybe 3, that are the definition of compostable plastic bags or compostable bioplastic bags are 1B and 1C, meet the ASTM standard and are certified for compostability. So then that just becomes definitional. It's not relevant to what's prohibited or not. And then the sort of, I think it's just those 2 criteria. And then we have
C.
And then
logo thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, C. I'm sorry, B and C are the 2 pieces that would be part of that definition. And then we have the question of, so if you're prior to point of sale, do you have to go with, right today, no limit, a limit on all plastics, regardless of whether they're compostable or not, or provisions that allow compostables, but don't otherwise allow plastic. And just to throw one more wrinkle in there, if we really wanted to deal with, and this is where I think a meeting between Julie and Laura could be helpful, if we really wanted to deal with the farmers markets, having them do a pilot, like allowing an exemption for the farmers markets to use compostable for bulk prior to point of sale, that could be a way to test compostable plastic in a limited, to business space. Again, not for at point of sale, before point of sale, for the packaging of those bulk items. I'm not saying I'm fully supportive of that. I'd really want to hear other views, but that would be one way to just really narrow this use and deal with some of what I hear Councilmember Schultz saying about, we're going to create this big new problem, and Councilmember Kovar suggests that it would potentially create a problem, but it's a much narrower problem. If we do create a problem, it's specifically focused on the bulk items prior to point of sale, sold at 2 farmers markets. And that's something we could much more easily fix if it truly proves to be unworkable. And frankly, given that I think we've already mostly agreed on the idea of giving farmers markets a year phase-in, it could be that after a year the farmers markets decide they don't even want to use compostable. It turns out that there's 1,000 farmer markets across the country that are using non-plastic, and we amend this before the year's up.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I hate to say this, but I agree with Councilmember Schultz. That
I can't believe that. Why do I write home and tell Mom?
That when we write this, we need to do it in the simplest form possible. And from what I hear and what I believe that I want is for the what we're calling the bulk food bags, the bags that are for picking up the fruits and vegetables in the produce area, etc. That all we need to say is that they they cannot be plastic bags, and I don't think we need to say anything about the compostable bags or paper bags or anything else at that point. They can't be plastic bags. And it may be that some store wants to use cloth bags. I mean, who cares? So we're not telling what they can't. We're telling what they can't use, not all the different options of what they can use. Personally, I would be happy with just the one section saying that they can't use plastic bags for either the bulk foods or for the point of sale bags. But again, I think the simplicity is very valuable in writing this. I know much to the chagrin of an attorney, but
Councilmember Qureshi?
Thanks, Mayor. I would join, excuse me, Councilmember Mill's suggestion that compostable is something that should be moved into, if that's something we're going to entertain, into the definition section with a potential revision and call that includes, prior to point of sale and point of sale. It may make the ordinance clearer. I think the only response that I would have to my colleagues' comments about compostable bags, I think irrespective of what you do with compostable bags, bags that cannot be recycled end up in a landfill. And at the end of the day, in a landfill, a compostable bag is better than a plastic bag. So I think, I recognize the issue with how that level of recycling does not necessarily exist, but from a pure scientific matter, a compostable bag is better for the environment with its impact if it does end up there. So that's why I support the option that's currently on the table, but I would join in the request to revise this so that maybe we can look at this more closely in sort of a revised fashion.
Okay. I would just say, and I'm by no means an expert, but I think the information that Peter got was that plastic bags actually are recyclable. I know the city doesn't collect them, but grocery stores do.
Right.
I hope they actually recycle them. I don't know.
Giant
But the message that Peter got was that plastic bags are recyclable if people put compostable plastic bags in with regular plastic bags. Then it messes up the recycling. And if they put compostable bags in the trash and they end up in the landfill, the way they decompose emits methane gas. So it's actually worse than a regular plastic bag in the landfill. Is that your understanding of?
I don't know the thing about the methane. I didn't.
Maybe I'm mixing up.
I heard someone say that. I was
maybe
more,
that's who.
I was more looking
at
the first piece of that. So that, in other words, and I'm sorry if I wasn't recognized, but
you are now.
I occasionally have some plastic bags at home, and I will bring them and put them in that thing at Safeway, which is where I go when I'm not going to Whole Foods or one of these other places. And so, if me or anybody got a compostable bag somewhere at a store and came home and then took whatever was in there out and just took that compost bag, put it in with the other plastic bags that the person had, and then 3 weeks later, next time they went to Safeway, took all that, and it was 12 regular plastic bags and 4 compostable bags, stuffed it all in there. Based on what we're hearing, that would be problematic. I think that, and I don't know about the methane part of it.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say, I can't find the article now, but I know there was an article in the last 6 months to say it has gotten so expensive to recycle the plastic bags that no one is actually recycling plastic bags.
I think that was the New York Times.
Yeah, it was a New York Times article, and it said that because of the price of oil has dropped so much, and these lighter plastic bags, particularly the ones that are used for bulk items, kind of muck up the machines anyway, and it costs so much money that Safeway and other ones, I don't know, they may be collecting them, but in that New York Times article it said it is no longer financially possible for recycling places to recycle these bags. Can I make a suggestion that there's changes recommended here, that we take a hand vote on these changes and hold off on the first reading until these items are reconciled, and perhaps we can look into whether or not this issue regarding the compostable bags.
And I hate to say I'm not a scientist, because that sounds like I'm denying global warming. I'd like to know. But I do have one other comment, and I appreciated Councilmember Mail's point about the exemption, and maybe there's a way to structure the exemption so that it says it will not apply to the farmers markets for the extra year, for no more, for up to that year, with the understanding that there'll be some discussions taking place between now and then. I'm not sure it'll be a pilot, but at least the idea that, hey, if we can figure out a way to make it work before that, let's do it. But they have up to that amount of time if they can't. And I'm not sure exactly language-wise how we could write that up. But that would be the outer edge. And then if you could,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to say a couple of things. One, I support Councilmember Mail's idea of some type of pilot. So if we can get some data on whether compostable bags are an issue and how people at the farmers markets are dealing with them, I think that would be invaluable information. Other thing from Councilmember Kovar, the information he gave about the issues with recycling, that was also given to me from Julie Lawson, Executive Director of Trash Free Maryland. It is a problem. That is why I'm trying to stay away from the compostable bags, because I want this to be as easy as possible for consumers and for the vendors, the grocers, so that there isn't this problem that we do not anticipate. If we ban everything, people start putting the compostable bags in with the other plastic bags. All this stuff is sent to a recycler that may recycle, it may not, and then the machinery gets messed up. I don't want that to come back to, why are you guys doing it this way? You should be doing it this other way. Let the vendors, I think, they could figure out what works in the marketplace, as long as we tell them that we don't want plastic in the system anymore. they'll find out, they'll figure out some other resource to use. So, thanks.
Councilmember Schultz, do you?
Yeah, I'm in a very agreeable frame of mind at this point. I think Councilmember Mail's approach makes some sense in terms of reorganizing this section. I think keeping the ordinance simple, like Councilmember Siemens said, makes sense. It occurs to me that we're dealing with what appears to be rapidly changing technology in the bag business. But the price of petroleum is another variable. But I would point out that in the last few months, a barrel of petroleum has virtually doubled from $26 a barrel to close to $50 a barrel, and who knows where it's going to be 3 months from now, or 6 months, or a year from now. So there's some moving parts here that are completely external to us, and I think a little bit of patience on our part would behoove us. And so I'm in favor of not really doing anything tonight except asking that, to pursue reorganizing the text a little bit, like Councilmember Mail said, and figuring out, getting some verification from Ms. Lawson and the other lady that spoke at the beginning, Tanya. I don't remember her last name. She had some good information from a reliable source. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of cities, so part of me sort of thinks we're trying to reinvent a wheel that's already been working, but the technology is changing so fast that it's hard to figure it out.
Yep. Good. All right. So I'm counting at least over four people supporting not voting on this evening, taking Councilmember Mail's recommendation on reorganizing, and then bring it back for a first reading. Do you need more direction?
Well, I guess I hear the need for a reorganization, but I believe I'm hearing that we also need more information. Maybe we need kind of and I don't know where we get this, but we need to understand what actually makes the most sense from an environmental perspective. So
yeah, I mean, I think Ms. Lawson,
is
I did not receive Ms. Lawson's comments until we sat down, so I did not have a chance to, I don't think, no. So this is the first I was seeing them, so I haven't had a chance to actually look at them tonight.
Okay.
So, and maybe you did and I just missed it, so, yeah, and I don't know if there's any, if city staff has any views on it, but I think we have to come back to this question on.
I mean, could we maybe get a report from our sustainability person, or I just don't want to. It doesn't make sense to reorganize if we haven't decided what we're doing.
Well, I think the reorganization, again, I think we have agreement on point of sale and beyond. Yeah. So that part's not affected by whatever we learn or don't learn about compostables. It's prior to point of sale.
Yeah.
So it narrows the point of discussion. Moving the definition of compostable is probably relevant in the definition section.
Anyway.
Regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplification of the organization will work, and then as we find out information, we can decide if they're going to take out the compostable.
Right, and we can do that at first reading as an amendment.
Well, I mean, I think what made this ordinance complex was the addition of compostable.
Right, but I think that was because it was within the document as opposed to in the definitions. It may be useful separating that out.
No, I mean, I can definitely do that, but I guess the question is, are we set on allowing or requiring compostable bags? That's what I'm not clear on.
And I don't think
we are. I don't think we're clear on it.
So if you include it, then it can be taken out if they decide to take it out.
Right.
And I think separating it between pre and
point of sale and prior
really does make sense, because that's whatever the differences are in the end that we agree to.
Right.
You're right, Tim. That's where those are
Yeah.
the two categories. So I think that makes sense.
Because what I'm hearing on agreement on is the point of sale, the year for the farmers markets, and pretty much, unless people had other things that we didn't get to.
But it's still a blanket exception for the farmer's market, only kind of in a whereas clause, we'll say we'll try to get them to do some kind of pilot. Is that? I just want to make sure I understand what this farmer's market's supposed to do for the year.
As written now, the farmer's market would have, sorry, where is it?
Where is it? Has an exemption for a year.
Has a year-long exemption, I think regardless of whether it's point of sale or
Yeah.
pre-point of
Right.
sale.
No, but I thought we were talking about doing something different with the farmer's market.
We are, but I think particularly if we could get Laura Barclay and
Julie Lawson
to meet, they might make a helpful suggestion in that space that you don't have to at this time draft.
And that doesn't need to go in the I guess, Councilmember Miller, you put this forward, but I would say I'm not sure that has to go in the ordinance versus up front the whereas clause, right?
Could be, yeah. We
don't know.
Right.
But the thing about it is, we should have Julie Lawson come in, and we can ask her some questions and see if she can. You know,
Yeah, because I think as
answer
Councilmember
those.
Schultz said, it changes, this is moving,
She
so.
come back. She came before us, so
Yes.
she should come
Yeah.
back.
But we never got to really come.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be ready to vote next.
Right. 3 minutes. Right.
We might be ready to vote next time.
I-
Let's
I
be
just-
optimistic.
Can I just add
Yes.
something? Is that, it's interesting is that the Old Town business area has only one grocer in it, and one florist, and the bakery. And the grocer, of course, is the co-op. There's no other store in Old Town that sells anything like produce or bulk foods, whereas it's the CDA area, actually all of New Hampshire Avenue, and parts of the university as well, that have all the grocery stores in the city. And most of them are really, small ones that are owned by ethnic ownership and cater almost entirely to ethnic people. So when you're looking for guidance, we ought to be, for real world, user guidance, we ought to keep that fact in mind. I mean, I'm not adverse to having Ms. Barclay give us all the information she can, certainly not, but a lot of the businesses that'll be affected are in my side of the city.
So do you think Melanie should go?
Well, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
At least she should be made aware and invited if she thinks that she can contribute something. Or knowing Melanie, she'd be more than willing to go out and talk to people, literally go to their shops and ask them.
Okay, great.
Sure. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to our next voting item. It's a first reading ordinance terminating the Area B permit parking program.
Aye.
You need to move it first. I need someone to move it.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Kovar moves it. Councilmember Smith second. All those in, any discussion, any questions?
Well,
All those in favor of the ordinance terminating the Area B permit parking program, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstaining? Nope. All right.
If I can just make one just little comment. That
Oh, sorry.
I really like our new format of the cover,
yes,
and
yeah.
it worked really well, particularly with this item. So I'm just letting you know that it was a useful exercise to go through.
what is the advantage or the reason that this was changed?
The reason, the primary reason is for ADA reasons online,
Oh, really?
but it also incorporates the environmental effects.
Makes it easier to photocopy, too.
Good. Okay, next is our consent agenda.
I missed the blue.
With some, we can copy it on blue. We can put it on blue paper.
Could we use blue?
I think we can,
I missed the blue.
Yes, we can. What's the environmental impact of that?
It's worse than a plastic bag.
What's the
Don't say
fiscal
that.
impact?
All right, we're going. The consent agenda. Who would like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Councilmember Mail, second.
I did.
Councilmember Schultz, second. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Nope. All right, now we're to our work
I
session.
don't know who moved that.
Councilmember Mayle, Councilmember Schultz. Sorry. Okay, now to our work session is a discussion of the proposed extension of owner-occupied group house registration program. And Ms. Daines, you want to give us a little preamble to that one?
As the mayor has indicated, staff is requesting council authorization to continue the owner-occupied group house registration program. When the program was originally established by ordinance in 2013, there was a sunset clause included in the code that was established to allow for a reevaluation and possible modification of the program. Given that the council is having ongoing conversations regarding affordable housing, and recognizing that there are some modifications or revisions that have been proposed for the ordinance, what we would ask the council to do is defer that conversation until after we've had an opportunity to go through and complete the affordable housing plan that's scheduled for FY17 and focus purely on the elimination of the sunset clause. What that will allow us to do is to continue the program and include it in the whole broader evaluation of the city's affordable housing program.
I think the important part of this is it allows basic inspections for life safety.
Yes, that's what the fundamental reason for or fundamental motivation behind doing the registration program in the first place was to ensure that people that were living in group house environments had some basic expectations regarding being able to get out of the house in case of a fire, that there were smoke alarms, that wasn't going to fall down around them, type of thing. It's very basic code inspections, very limited expectations regarding how the property is managed.
And do we define Airbnb in this?
I was really hoping nobody'd ask that. The honest answer is that it could apply, but it depends on the Airbnb. Because they're not all Airbnbs are the same. Right. Elizabeth Wallace, who spoke earlier, runs an excellent Airbnb and has taken the initiative to apply for an owner-occupied group home registration. Others don't have the same type of arrangement and would not necessarily be required to have an or not necessarily required to be registered.
Okay. And do you have any feeling on whether or not we should require them to be registered, or?
It depends. One of the things that the council might wish to consider is that Councilmember Reamer at the county level has proposed some initial legislation governing Airbnbs, and it may make sense to sort of wait and see how that shakes out.
Right, but just your opinion overall, do you think this is something that should be regulated or not?
I'm a huge fan of Airbnbs.
I know, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I know. And frankly, I've had nothing but wonderful experiences. I know that that is not true with everyone. The tricky part is trying to figure out where they are, and that, do you have to go in and register someone who shares the bed in their living room, or the bed in their bedroom in some cases. So it's tricky.
Okay.
But overall, no, I don't really think they need to be registered.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Qureshi.
I had the question about Airbnb as well, but I guess the question that I have is, I know this is owner-occupied. I presume there's no regulation for group homes that aren't occupied by an owner. Is that correct? Is there such a thing?
Yeah.
There are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
there are some tenants, for example, that will sublet rooms within a house or an apartment that they have rented out. And some owners or landlords allow that. They don't technically qualify as an owner-occupied group home because or house because the owner doesn't live in the same space as all the people that are renting from him. Right. But they go through the rental housing licensing program. There are other group houses, if you will, that are regulated by the county's Health and Human Services Department. that are more transitional types of housing for people recovering from substance issues or homelessness, things like that. Those are not covered under any of the city's code, with the exception of exterior condition of the property. They are specifically exempted, for example, from the rental housing licensing program. And again, typically, the owner of the building doesn't live in those properties.
So the follow-up, the reason I asked that question is in Ward 3, as you know, in Manor Circle, there's a number of these, or at least a couple, at least group homes. I just was unsure what regulated those group homes, if there's city ordinances that will regulate them or if that's a county thing. Are you aware?
County does not regulate group homes and don't really allow them. The tricky part we have right now with the registration of owner-occupied group houses is that it's really difficult to determine whether or not one is or not. So a lot of it's been self-reported or complaints that we receive from adjoining property owners.
Thanks.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. I was under the impression that maybe a few decades back there had been a change in the local law on the number of unrelated people who could reside together in the same house, or having too many apartments within a house. Is that
apparently
relevant
in the
still?
80s there was a big push because a lot of the larger residential units or houses in your ward, for example, had been cut up into all these tiny little apartments. And I don't have the full history of it, but I know that there was a movement to eliminate all of those and return them to single-family homes or more carefully defined multifamily properties.
It's referred to as the phase back.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a whole section actually in the zoning code that just talked about Tacoma Park and
But so you can't have unlimited numbers of people.
That was different. It wasn't the number of people. It was the number of units in a building.
Okay. And does that still apply though?
Yeah.
So in terms of
that's a zoning. It's
a
basically
non-owner
a zoning
occupied
issue.
place, you couldn't just have. I mean, could you have 10 people just living in a house?
You could. The zoning ordinance limits the number of unrelated individuals that can live in a single residential unit. The reality is regulating that is incredibly problematic.
So I think with Airbnb, you mentioned Elizabeth Wallace, who often, as I understand it, has longer-term clients who are here on various international programs and so on. But if somebody just does it, makes one of their rooms available twice a year or something like that, that's what some people do in Airbnb, right? And at the moment, we're not inspecting those. Is that
Correct.
what you're saying?
We're not actively or proactively identifying all the Airbnbs in the city.
And apparently under Airbnb, you aren't covered by discrimination laws, so you can discriminate.
I've heard rumors to that effect that there are problems with that, yes.
So a couple of other things that Elizabeth Wallace mentioned. She had sent a document. I didn't get a chance to share it with everybody, but just a few other things that she mentioned, and I'd love to just hear your reaction to that. She had indicated that the online connection to the website to register wasn't operational,
It's
at
all
least at
fixed,
one point.
yeah.
So, okay, well, that's good. She also mentioned that in some cases it can take a couple of visits to make sure that the various things are affected. And interestingly, she thought the $50 fee might not be enough, depending on how that worked out. And I wonder whether you thought it would make sense to say, there would be to go back, if you had to go back numerous times to get several things corrected, should we charge more, or just in terms of the staff time that's involved?
Frankly, a lot of these questions are things that I'm hoping we can address when we go through and do the affordable housing study. The reality is that group houses provide a wonderful opportunity for people. It's affordable, provides companionship. It's a great way to live for a number of people within the community, and what I'm hoping that we can do is include that as an element of the affordable housing study that we've got planned, so that we can go through and more carefully evaluate the fee, if there should be additional conditions associated with being registered, if they should be allowed at all, or expanded to include Airbnbs and things like that.
So one of the other questions was that, if I'm reading this correctly, the authorization terms are on the calendar year, so no matter when you register.
Correct.
You-
We do that with the rental housing licensing program as well. Otherwise, we run into challenges with prorating, or it's just cleaner. We've been doing it that way for about
So
5
if
or
someone's
6 years.
less than half the way through the year,
Still-
that year counts as a full year and otherwise not, maybe, or
Correct.
something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So does anyone else have any comments? I want to, again, be specific that we're looking at eliminating the sunset, because I think we're going to revisit all this, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure all of us are prepared to get to this level of detail.
Okay.
So are there any comments on eliminating the sunset?
Right now, it's scheduled to go off the books the end of June of this year.
Councilmember Schultz, do you have a comment on ending the sunset?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favor of extending this, or eliminating the sunset and then extending the owner-occupied group home ordinance for whatever period is necessary. If it's 3 months, a year, the ordinance is a really good thing. It's a shame that Montgomery County doesn't have an equivalent, and it might be that through Hans Reamer's efforts it will. It may be that the Airbnb thing will force that on other jurisdictions. I do think, and we'll get into this at a later time, as the mayor just said, that there are issues with the current ordinance as written, but and they have something to do with the number of group homes in particular proximity to each other, and whether adjacent owners can be made aware of the existence of a group home. And I don't have answers for all this. I'm concerned about parking, because if you're in a permit parking zone and you have people who are coming in that don't have a sticker, and there are no leases with group homes, so there's no way of knowing who lives there. How do you regulate parking? And if you have 4 units, then maybe you have 4 cars. Those are things that I don't have answers for, but I think are potential issues, practical issues, that I would rely really heavily on you and your staff and the input of people from the community, as well as Mr. Reamer's office, as to how to distinguish these kinds of problems and then separate them from the Airbnb thing. Because I think all of us who live in Tacoma Park want to have some sense that things going on in the houses adjacent to us are more or less under control, in the general sense of the word. But I think we have a good ordinance, and definitely needs to be extended.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. The residence of these group homes varies widely, but I know some of the group homes have residents who are ill-equipped to judge their own safety and security, and are ill-equipped to advocate for their own needs. And so I think the ordinance that we have now is mandatory for at least ensuring the minimum requirements for a safe and secure home that safeguards both the residents and the neighbors. So I fully support removing the sunset on this. Thank you.
Okay. I'm hearing no objections to removing the sunset, so I think we can move forward and bring this back to council. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much, Ms. Nays. All right, and with that, we are adjourned. And remember, no meeting right till June 1st.
Except Friday morning.
Except Friday morning, right? Except Friday morning. Bike there.